one of our hockey insiders from TSN, Darren Dreger. Good morning, Dregs.
You know, I love doing the Calgary and the Edmonton podcast this time of year.
Yeah, yes. It's chilly out here in Alberta, pal.
Huge game coming up. Everyone's so excited. So excited.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what. If you guys are frustrated, and I know you are frustrated, imagine what the brass is thinking in both cities, right? Edmonton, were they overhyped? Yeah, I think they're obviously overhyped, and I'm a part of that nationally. I picked the Oilers to win the Stanley Cup, and here they are less than 10 games in, and they look like anything other than a Stanley Cup contender. And part of that is the old copycat theory, right? They changed their defensive zone coverage in Edmonton because they got beat by the Vegas Golden Knights, who employ that structure, and the Boston Bruins, who have a pretty good history of success, but the players don't seem to want to play it. And why did they implement it in the first place, other than, in Vegas, you could appreciate how many goalies did they go through last year? 7? Yeah. So in Edmonton now, it looks abundantly obvious that they don't trust their goaltending, and the Vegas Golden Knights do what they do in winning the Stanley Cup. So that's got to be the best approach. But it's not the best approach, and we continue to see it game in and game out. And yeah, I mean, the heat is up, man. It is up. We're feeling it here in Toronto. It's that wave of hotness coming out of the west.
Yeah,
which is kind of nice because we talk. I don't know if you've noticed this, Boomer. We talk a lot about the Leafs in Toronto.
Well, you guys?
Oh, yeah. We talk a lot about the Leafs. So
yeah, well, you're right there. What else are you going to do? Who else?
It's kind of nice to be distracted by 41 game suspensions for gambling violations, and the toils, the struggles, and all the nonsense going on in Edmonton and Calgary.
Well, you're welcome. That's on us. We got you. And Warner was just talking about it, that there were excuses last year, and I'll just use Jonathan Huberdeau because it felt like that was where the longest list was. High profile trade, big contract about to kick in, new to the city, playing on the wrong wing, the coach doesn't like him, all of that. All of those were kind of gone. He's been on the right side where he wants to play, and he's been here for a year, and the coach is gone, and the mood is supposed to be different, but his play is the same, if not worse. There's no way out of it.
How do you fix it?
How do you fix it?
He has to fix it. It's not like Craig Conroy's going to wave a magic wand and bring in a bunch of new players. I mean, that's just not feasible when you're in season. But the more this lingers and the heavier the issues get, then maybe there will be some form of change. But it's not like we, expected Jonathan Huberdeau to be as good as he was when he was beside Barkov in Florida. There needed to be an improvement, a vast improvement from last year. But is a point per game too much to ask based on that contract? I would say probably not. So he knows he needs to be better.
I don't see anything like a point per game guy.
I was going to say, usually
he looks like Austin Czarnik up from the AHL.
Honestly,
bad offensive decisions. This is
you
brutal.
don't even see flashes of a star hockey player.
Didn't know he played.
We just talked about it. They're 90 games in, Kadri and Huberdeau. Like this is their second seasons. We can't recall a single game either of those guys has taken over in the last 13 months.
Right.
And that's $17.5 million.
It's not acceptable.
That's a huge issue.
Let's cut to the chase, though. It ain't happening here.
Yeah.
We can hope and pray and do some dances and try and change things and all this, whatever.
So what do? You tear it down?
Well,
you just start moving pieces?
And I'm just talking about Huberdeau himself, and it's impossible to move him. Yeah. But the only way he resurrects himself, I don't think it's here. I really, truly don't believe it's here in Calgary. Skinner in Buffalo. Couldn't get rid of him. Too much money. Blah blah. You can go and resurrect yourself, but it ain't happening here.
So how did it happen in Buffalo for Skinner, but it won't happen here for?
Well, we've already done the new coach, and we've done all the changes, and we got a guy that was trying. Skinner was being played on the fourth line, so he was having. There was no opportunity for him to have success here, right? They had written him off, and then a new guy comes in and goes, "I'm going to give you a chance." Yeah. Well, he's getting a chance. We've gone through 2 coaches already in a year. You can't do another coach. You absolutely can't. And I just think for Huberdeau and for the Flames, as hard as it's going to be to make something happen, that's the only way this plays out. Yeah. Or you're going to ride this negativity for another 2-3 years, and then you maybe change a coach, and the whole you get lucky that you get a superstar that can play with Huberdeau in a draft, like Thompson comes up. That's how it changed for Skinner. But you had to ride through a bunch of crap to get there.
And it is a ripple effect when you're in the middle of it too, right? Because Michael Backlund signs his extension, family reasons, he believes in the team, he wants to stay there. There's reporting of late that Noah Hannafin is engaged in contract discussions. You wonder about Lindholm. Well, I think it's not being overly critical to wonder out loud here. Would those players want to sign long term? Well, they might have 2 weeks ago.
Sure.
I don't know why they would now. I don't know.
If you're the
why
Flames, Darren, why?
Yeah. And
are you locking up an old mediocre team?
Yeah.
I'll tell you why for Lindholm, because I was going to bring this up in the conversation today anyway. I think, is it 6 Pinder unrestricted free agents on the team?
Yeah, depending if you include Shillington or not.
So let's call it 5 or 6. But anyway, what do free agents typically do in their contract years?
Yeah.
They play like they're unstoppable typically, right? Like for a guy like Lindholm, he should be dominating right now, playing as good to hockey as you've ever seen him play. And he's just not. He looks disheartened, just like the rest of them. Something is amiss down at the Dome, and it is nothing to do with the coach or the GM or management or the media or the city. It's what's in that room.
Which player last night post game said we lost our will in the first period?
Uyghur.
I mean, I didn't come close to playing pro hockey or being a professional athlete. How at this stage of the regular season do you lose your will at any point of the game? Let alone
it's 2-0.
They broke us in the first period.
2-0 with half the game remaining against St. Louis, and your will is broken. It's more. It ain't your will.
That's an indictment, man. That one would hurt my feelings if I were a Flames fan.
It's a few straight days of odd commentary coming out of the locker room as far as interviews and stuff.
Lots of Zadorov stuff too, where he's been critical. Other guys sort of saying, "Well, I interpret it differently." Coleman says he's sick of losing. Like this is a long road here, Dreger. If they look anything like this the rest of the way, I don't know how you do anything but blow this thing up. Like, how could you extend anyone right now? Are you kidding me?
I hear you, and that was the point I was making. But how do you blow it up? Because guess what's happening here? If this continues on. Conroy and company can't do more to the front office, I don't think, than what they've already done. Ownership isn't going to pay another coach not to coach the Calgary Flames. Yeah. This isn't, a management issue. Conroy inherited essentially what he has. And you know what other NHL general managers are doing now when they're watching the Calgary Flames? They're not looking at Huberdeau. I think Calgary would have a market to some degree. That's a big ticket, though. I'm kind of stopping in my tracks. You
got to eat some of the contract.
But guys are looking for your young players, your prospects and all of that. So unless you find a fit where there's another player or players on other teams that are equally struggling, and you're just looking for a change of address, which Rhett tell me, does that work? It doesn't often work, right? Where you take back a struggling guy and a bad contract, and you give a struggling guy and a bad contract. Normally, what happens is you end up with
it's happened
a struggling
here.
guy with a bad contract.
Lucic and Neal's the one here for sure.
But what are we talking about? Lucic was overpaid. Neal was overpaid for that point in their careers, and they weren't impactful. Luch kind of played better when he got to Calgary, but he still wasn't the Lucic, and he was never going to be. So we knew that when he signed the contract. So maybe that was a net gain for the Flames in that situation. But it's not going to be an impactful turn of events for the franchise, and all of a sudden they're going to launch it off into promised land again.
No, I would think you sell all these UFAs, you collect high picks, you accumulate assets, and sort of this notion like, they've got too much talent to bottom out. Like, no, they haven't even sold anyone yet, and they look like they're bottoming out. Like they're right there with Anaheim right now. If you can nail together a couple of top 5 picks here, why not?
Yeah, but you're not doing that now.
No. What do you mean? Like, you don't think they could be bad enough to finish in the bottom 5-10 here?
Well, maybe. I mean, obviously, if they continue to stumble and bumble the way they are now, but we're looking at closer to the trade deadline, right?
Sure. I see what you're saying.
You're not getting anything of value coming back based on the way these guys are playing in the first 10 or fewer games. So, yeah,
it's what's crazy. It's still October.
Yeah.
Like it's October, men, and it feels like it's the dog days of winter. Yeah. Where how are we ever going to get out of this?
I haven't checked yet. What was the attendance like?
I've got it right here.
Because that's coming next, right?
Well, it already is.
Yeah, I was just in Winnipeg talking to Mark Chipman, one of the owners of the Winnipeg
16,897. So a hair on
and there was
16,
16. There.
No, but that's paid for, and that's how you always do attendance. 19,289 is capacity, so they're missing over 2,000 people. That's considerable.
But what's the season ticket base in Calgary? I think it's still pretty strong, isn't it?
I think that's not a number that we hear publicly, but I would think it's strong.
But I mean, that's normally what happens, and that's the only thing a fan can do.
You know what, Dregs?
Get on social media. Yeah. What else are they going to do? They're just not going to show up. That's what's going to happen.
We can pivot away, I guess, and then come back. But I did want to ask you about that because you had that sit down with Mark Chipman, and I don't know that I've seen anything quite like that, where it's a one-on-one with the owner of the team, and the owner is he's clearly upset and emotional about when the team left in the first place and bringing it back, and now for the Jets to be in the spot that they're in. Having had that sit down with him, what's your appreciation, or how would you characterize what's going on there?
Well, he's wearing it, right, and that's an honest observation and it's a legit one because that's what I felt and saw, and it resonated in the piece that we did. They look back now to when they first launched, and I think they recognized they made some mistakes. I mean, there was such an injection of enthusiasm in that market. We're getting our team back in the National Hockey League. And so they sold a big number of season tickets to individual seat holders and not to corporate Canada. And now they recognize that was a bit of a blunder because corporate Canada is sitting there and going, I don't know. Do we really want to buy in at this stage? And the landscape of the corporate sector has shifted as well. And then on top of that, if we go back to Edmonton for a moment, and when things are good in Edmonton, you guys have been in that building, excuse me, it rocks. They get going in that building. Around the facility, it's a party atmosphere a couple of hours prior to the game. And Mark Chipman just wants that so bad. And it's crickets outside the building in Winnipeg leading up to the game. It's ghost town central. So the team is playing well. He's hopeful that the fans will respond.
If I may, Dean, just jump in on that.
Go ahead.
Is Winnipeg a cautionary tale? Because I see similarities. Both teams, Calgary and Winnipeg, had, no one wants to be here. These guys are a year away from free agency. You're going to trade these guys. You don't want to be here. Yeah. They do pay to keep Scheifele and keep Hellebuck, which caught people by surprise. And yet you don't see that response in the market yet. Now, maybe they're good. If they get into the playoffs, we know they're going to fill that place. It'll be chaos. But I sort of think of the Flames like, if ownership is worried about we have to try to be competitive because the fans show up when it's competitive, I think this market would be way more receptive to a rebuild than I think ownership thinks. And I also think what fans really don't want to see is more mediocrity and pretending that this team is good. And so locking in guys like Winnipeg did it doesn't necessarily correlate to bottom line success.
It doesn't. In Winnipeg's case, they didn't feel like they had a choice. And I'd be curious if the same thing, kind of drifts over to the Flames organization as well. Because as Chipman talked about in the sit-down interview, he did a lot of research on what it takes, what it costs, and how you have to embrace a traditional rebuild. And in certain cases, it's not a 3-year turnaround, a 5-year turnaround. It can be 7+ years if you're patient and do it the right way. Well, good luck selling that to a Canadian fan base. And when you're paying everything in US dollars, like again, if we focus on Winnipeg, smallest venue in the NHL. Well, next to Arizona. Well,
smallest market for sure, right?
Smallest market, but they have their player costs are the same as the top teams in the NHL. And by player costs, I'm not just talking about salaries. Try and feed these guys 4 or 5 times a day, and 2 teams, not just 1 team, because your American League team is there as well. So I'm not making excuses for the Winnipeg Jets, but or the Calgary if they decide to go down that path of rebuild. But Canadian clubs are really apprehensive in talking about rebuild or even a renovation because it is a costly venture. So you try and fix on the fly, and that's what Winnipeg did in extending their 2 stars.
And I guess the only places they've really done it, excuse me, have been Montreal, Toronto, where those fan bases are so healthy. Like there's a 100-year wait list for the Leafs. Like, yeah, you can do whatever you want. They're still paying.
First picks overall too, though, right? And,
of course, yeah, that helps.
You land Austin Matthews. Let's see what they have in Juraj Slafkovsky in Montreal. But the draft can turn things around. I mean, Chicago was ghost town as well prior to winning the Bedard sweepstakes, and now their season tickets and their ticket prices have at least doubled. So you have to be extraordinarily fortunate for that.
And here it's tough because in a way, the fans are already absorbing that pain that would accompany a rebuild, except they aren't.
There's no hope.
There's
not
no
rebuilding.
Yeah, they're not rebuilding. There's not like there's 2 or 3 burgeoning stars who you're waiting to give the reins of the team over to.
No.
There really isn't. And we've talked about it for a long time. It just feels like this team is needed to make a major shift, and ownership has been unwilling. I guess if there's no other choice than when the team is almost historically bad or just is so bad that you're bottom 3, bottom 5 in the league. What more of more loud can the message be?
Yeah, no, you're right. But we're in the dark days here, the early goings of the regular season. And Boomers, you talked about it's October.
Yeah.
But enough is enough. And stop talking about it. Stop dropping F-bombs and all of that nonsense to the media and just find a way to play better, right?
Yeah.
You know, individually, it's the old cliche that we're all very familiar with. If each guy does his job, then collectively, shouldn't that be enough to play better and maybe win a game here or there, be better in front of your goalie? And it feels like that's what both Edmonton and Calgary are going to have to embrace individually inside the dressing room.
Somebody's going to win Sunday. That's great news, hey?
Yeah.
I do want to talk about Edmonton, but if the Flames could just get on the same page, because there were games last year where they were actually okay, but their goalie let them down. I know their goalie is by far their best player, and now they can't score to save their life. What about in Edmonton? They also lose. It's an identical 3-0 score. They're in a 4-game skid. Yes, they're going to play on Sunday, but it is different there. This was a non-playoff team in Calgary, and there's hope of being better, but I don't know how realistic the hope was. In Edmonton, like you said, a lot of people were picking this team to win it all. I guess there's always, when you have a superstar, is there always kind of that waiting? He's going to pull us out of this. Well, when he comes back, we'll be good. I wonder, is that any part of what we're seeing there?
Yeah, it is. But the truth is, before Connor got hurt, you know, we saw all kinds of concern, including his play and others. Top to bottom, the Edmonton Oilers weren't good enough. I mean, the good news is it's a short-term injury. I think, you know, Woodcroft was playing us in the media a little bit, you know, wondering about him coming back sooner than later. I'd be shocked if he was in the Heritage Classic, but I don't think he'll miss much after that. But they again collectively need to find a way. I didn't believe that Connor Brown was going to be a tipping point difference maker, but I thought that it was a worthwhile signing. You have the history with Connor McDavid. He's coming off that serious knee injury. I'm a fan of Connor Brown. I know him. I liked him in Toronto. I liked him in Ottawa. You know, things went sideways with him in Washington, primarily because of injury. But I honestly thought a healthy Connor Brown, whether he's playing on that top line or somewhere in that top 9, you know, he'd find a way because he brings so many unique tools to the game. Man, he hasn't pissed a drop yet. And
that's trouble, Darren. With that bonus next year?
It's weighing on him. There's no doubt about that. He's a high character individual. But again, I'm wondering, you know, why is it plaguing all of these guys? Not just the top dudes on that team, but, you know, if we don't believe that Connor Brown is as motivated as any player in the league, then we don't know Connor Brown at all. So why is it, you know, he's probably never going to be the driver on the line, but he can find a way to distribute the puck, win the puck battles, and do all of it, unless he still has the lingering effects of, you know, a brutal knee injury. So I don't know, but it just seems like anything that could go wrong in Edmonton has to this point.
So just to follow up on that, for clarity for people, they bring in Connor Brown at very low money and they give him a huge bonus for 10 games played. It's 3.25, and bonus overages you're allowed to do, but they affect next year's cap.
Correct.
So if Connor Brown plays a 10th game this season, basically almost all of the growth in the cap will go to him in the form of a bonus next year.
Yeah.
Do they think about sending him down to the A and not using him the rest of this year if he's not looking good after 9?
I'm going to say a hard no to that. And for a couple of reasons. I don't think, even though, look, I understand the question from a business perspective. I don't think you do that to a player like Connor Brown or do that to a player who has the experience that he has. And then there is a deep-rooted relationship with McDavid. There really is. And not that Connor McDavid runs the Edmonton Oilers. Of course he doesn't. But he has a strong and valued opinion. And if you bury his best buddy, oh boy, that could get real tricky. That might be a bigger animal than you want to wrestle with, no matter who you are in that organization.
So what if he's a $1 million player? And that's fine. Is it the right thing to do with your hockey club with the cap as tight as it is to give him a $3.25 million bonus overage affecting next year? Like, because next year's the last year of Leon on that low deal, right? That's the last year of these two guys on the same deal.
But you know how managers look at next year? They look at next year as next year, and they look at it as being months and months away. And look, not to go back to the Shane Pinto thing here in Ottawa, but that pissed a few people off around the National Hockey League because Ottawa has cap issues, and by suspending Pinto the way that they did, he doesn't have a contract, so there's no cap hit. And what it does is it pushes the opportunity for Pierre Dorion, the general manager of the Sens, to find the necessary cap relief before the end of January when Pinto is able to sign and jump back into the National Hockey League. So there's a reprieve there. I don't think that Kenny Holland is looking that far down the road. And maybe it's not Kenny Holland. Maybe he just says
last year of his deal, right?
He's last year of his deal. He doesn't want to talk about whether or not he's willing to extend. I can guarantee you, if you asked him today and he was on record, he'd say, no, I'm good. I'm good. You want me to be an advisor? Yeah, maybe I'll be an advisor, but I've been there and I've done that and I can't do any more. So.
And with that, because I was going to ask, I'm not necessarily looking to stir up shit, but I just wonder about Woodcroft. I think he's a fine coach. I think he's
he's on the hot seat, Boomer. Is that what you're going to ask?
I was just it's when it's that hot. I just wonder. It feels like it's not going to be Kenny Holland because there again, what do you accomplish? The cap is what it is, and they're in the spot they're in. Yeah. At some point, if things continue in a downward trend, someone's head is on a pipe or whatever you want to call it. I just wonder whose head that is.
Yeah, and look, I'm not coming on the show here today to say he's definitely in the crosshairs because I don't know that to be true. Is he potentially vulnerable? I think he has to be, right? Mm-hmm. He initiated the defensive structure change. It's supported by the coaching staff. They've tried to work on it in practice. It's been a colossal failure. And if he's unwilling to change that, I'm sure being encouraged by management, then maybe he does approach that hot seat, but it not that the look matters from a GM perspective who's making those calls. That is a very emotional owner, Daryl Cates in Edmonton. Yeah, very emotional dude. I guarantee you, if his finger isn't on that panic button, it's hovering right over it. And senior management is getting all of that on an hour-by-hour basis. So could Jay Woodcroft be in jeopardy? Of course he could. And I know I'm not firmly answering that question, but how many coaches now have McDavid and Draisaitl had? Are we not going back to the Ken Hitchcock days? I mean, that might be an exaggeration, but they've gone through a few. So, and I'm not blaming the stars of the Edmonton Oilers. I just think collectively the GM will want to put it on the players first. And if he sees a response from the players or he doesn't see a response from the players, then you have no choice. You're running $1 billion business. You got to make those tough calls.
I am fascinated by this game on Sunday. It's both teams. If you took the players and put the post game comments up and you didn't put name bars or the chyron on the screen, which team does this guy play for, Calgary or Edmonton? If you didn't know the game, you it could be either one because we got to work harder and this is unacceptable and we're not having fun. Like the whole thing. Yeah. Someone's losing that hockey game.
Okay. So if Rhett was still playing in the National Hockey League,
and it's close.
I know he's not that far removed. You know what he could do? He could give you potential access to his account and maybe you could place, oh no, you can't bet on the NHL.
No, you can't do it, Dregs.
Can he bet on baseball?
do
That's
it.
the thing that
Is it,
confuses
hold on,
me,
is,
Dreg.
is it too soon for that kind of stuff?
No, but why can't he bet on baseball? Like, what the hell?
He can bet on baseball.
Did we not hear that it wasn't a hockey bet that got him in trouble, or is that wrong? What's your reporting there?
Second, what they said was he did not bet on NHL games. Shane Pinto did not bet on NHL games.
Okay, so
Well,
help us read between
Somebody's
the lines.
account might have.
no, it was there's a theory out there that he may have shared his account access, and this individual may have placed a bet that he shouldn't have placed.
Right. Why don't
Okay,
they come out and just be honest? Because
seriously,
the whole sports, hockey world is
I'm
doing this
100%
tap
with you.
dance, right? Like, just
Crazy.
tell the truth, and then everyone moves on. It's a busy world out there.
well,
Well,
now we know
look,
what the rules of engagement are, at least, right? Like the NFL finally gave us some clarity on this with Calvin Ridley, but they didn't even have a time he was going to come back. You're just indefinitely suspended.
Yeah.
And then he can reapply. Finally, they've said, okay, here are the rules, and here's how the punishment's being doled out. It feels like this is a big black box. You have no idea what's going to happen.
Well, and look, Marty Walsh from the Players Association. I mean, the gambling situations have been on the agenda for the fall tour right from the onset. I think he's got 26, 25 teams that he's got to visit with. I can assure you of this. Everything that is in, that code of restrictions specific to gambling will be outlined for these guys. If Darren Dreger wants to give Dean his access information, you got to know that, my account is specific to my IP address. So when I give access to somebody else and they place a bet on my account, it's a different IP address. And guess what happens? The gambling site, the partner goes, boop, boop, boop. That's no good. And then they realize, okay, this guy's a pro athlete. That's no good. And then the league finds out. But I'm with you. Like, why there's non-disclosure from the league, from the Players Association, from the player, it doesn't make any sense to me, because we're all assuming that Shane Pinto is egregiously in the wrong here because he's been suspended for 41 games.
Yeah, it's huge.
But I'm telling you, it's not for betting on any other sport, other than we know that he did not specifically bet on NHL games. So
Okay, so that helps with the explanation there. Thank you.
Kind of. That's my theory on it.
I liked your boop 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 there. We're sounding the alarms out here in Alberta. We'll just get that.
Can you use that?
Sound bite.
Who's the guy from Police Academy? That's great stuff.
That was brutal.
Yeah, that was good. Before we let you go, is there anything else? You're always kind of getting the pulse around the league. We're very focused on ourselves here, very selfish. What else is making news league-wide? Anything going on?
No, you know what? It's still relatively quiet. I mean, the undefeated are starting to lose now, right? So imagine that. You're not going to go 82-0. Pretty quiet, I would say, on the trade front. Yeah, I mean, there's teams that are restless, and the Alberta teams are restless and all that, but nothing that appears imminent. So we're kind of stumbling along here, hoping that you get to that place where we start to see some player movement, but not there yet.
Appreciate you as always, buddy. We'll talk to you next week. Have a fine weekend until then.
Those sunglasses are beautiful, man.
I make them look good. Thanks, Dregs.
Take care, guys.
Talk to you next week. Brought to you by TELUS, our insider hotline at TELUS. They're using their world-leading technology to drive meaningful change, from transforming healthcare and making the food supply more sustainable to reducing our environmental footprint and connecting Canadians in need. Last year, TELUS, their team members, and retirees volunteered 1.4 million hours and gave $125 million to local communities. The most giving company in the world, making the future friendly. Learn more at TELUS.com/givesback.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. Be sure to check out more of our content right here on the Flames Nation YouTube page. We had a bunch of great long-form interviews. You can check out some videos we've done as well outside of the studio. And of course, if you want more writing or merchandise stuff, flamesnation.ca or nationgear.ca. Appreciate you watching.